Welcome to Lesson 6 of Building a Basic Website. In this lesson, you're going to learn where to write CSS and about two very important concepts, inheritance and specificity. You can write your CSS in three different places. You already know one from Lesson 5, the head tag of an individual page, which is called an embedded style sheet. Let's learn the other two ways to write CSS, inline and on external style sheets. Sometimes if you want to be very precise, you might write what's called an inline CSS style. An inline CSS style is written like a hybrid between an HTML attribute and the CSS syntax you've been learning. For example, in the opening h2 tag in this HTML code, I could write what you see on your screen. See how it uses the CSS syntax for the property and value? Writing this attribute in the opening tag would turn the word hello blue. As long as you use style as an attribute and use those quotation marks, you can add as many CSS property and value declarations as you want, as you can see here on your screen. Now the h2 tag will be blue and have an Arial font. The advantage of this inline style is that it's very specific, which means it will almost always show up on screen exactly how you want it to. The disadvantage is time. You're not going to want to spend hours writing inline styles for every single tag on your website. When you're building a website, you'll almost always create one or more external style sheets. These are files where you write multiple CSS rules on an external page or sheet. You link to that external style sheet in the head tag of your page, and in one fell swoop, all the CSS style rules will apply to that page. Now let's talk about why you might choose one option or the other. To do that, we need to talk more about how CSS works. Watch what happens when I write a CSS rule for the body tag, saying the font should be Arial. See how every child tag, the paragraphs, the H1s, the anchor tags, change to an Arial font just because I changed their parent tag? That's called inheritance, and it's a bedrock principle of CSS. That's what the cascade in cascading style sheet stands for. Rules cascade down the line. Which brings us to specificity. Specificity refers to the guidelines that decide what shows up in your browser when your CSS conflicts with itself. For example, what if a CSS rule says the body text should be red, but another rule says the child paragraph tag should be blue? What if an inline style rule says the text should be green, but an external style sheet rule says it should be yellow? How does your computer decide what to display? Specificity rules determine what wins when you're sending mixed messages in CSS. You can download and use the specificity handout for all the gritty details of exactly how to determine specificity. For now, let's go over a few useful takeaways from the handout. Inline styles are the most specific way to write CSS. Embedded is second, and external is the least specific. That means if something absolutely isn't displaying the way you'd like, you can usually make it work by taking the time to write an inline style. ID selectors, the ones with the hashtags, are more specific than class selectors, and class selectors, which are the ones with the periods, are more specific than tag selectors. Usually, compound selectors are more specific than single selectors. There's an equation to figure out just how specific, but I'll leave that to the handout. After the property value of a CSS rule, you can hit the spacebar and add !important. This will prioritize that particular property and value. If you were to write the exact same selector twice in a row with two different values, what comes last, so what comes farther down the page, would win. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. CSS specificity is a little complicated, but here's the thing. If you can get your page to look the way you want, no matter how you write the CSS, then you've succeeded. And if I or another designer would have written the CSS a different way, so what? We'll see you next week in Lesson 7. you.